And to give this a little bit of context, we have hosted 275 events the last 17 years. We've had about 2,000 speakers on stage over 17 years, and Jeff Hoffman is the number one best speaker we've ever had here. That's why we have him back, and we're honored to have him back here in the room, and you're about to find out why. So Jeff is a humanitarian. He's a best-selling author. He is a Hollywood film producer. He has produced a Grammy-winning jazz album, an Emmy-winning TV show. He's been the CEO of public and private companies. He's been part of multiple startups whose names you'd recognize, such as Ubid, Priceline.com, Booking.com, and was the original inventor of the airport check-in kiosk. He's also the head of the Global Entrepreneur Network. And we want to do this fireside chat to kind of dig into some of the things he brought up on stage at our the last time he was on stage at our Super Summit 2 years ago. You can stream that talk on billionaires.com for free. He had half of the room, same demographic as here, in tears. I've never made someone cry over almost 300 events. And Jeff's just a great person, and we're honored to have him here. So, Jeff, what else would you want to, frame?
After all that, it's pretty much all downhill now. So,
can you start out giving a little bit more context on what you're most passionate about, of all the things you're doing right now, all the things you're excited about, just so people can kind of understand your perspective and where you spend most of your time right now?
Yeah, so for right now, the thing that I'm most passionate about is teaching people the mindset and skill set of entrepreneurship. Our nonprofit, which I spend the most of my time on, the Global Entrepreneurship Network, we're on the ground in 200 countries, which is why I'm not usually in this one, with a really simple mission statement to teach people everywhere in the world how to help themselves by starting a business. So that's what I'm passionate about. We need to teach people how to help themselves instead of being dependent on governments or anybody else.
Awesome. Yeah, we recently interviewed Tim Draper for 30 minutes, and he's such a huge supporter of entrepreneurs just like you. It remind me of him a bit. So last time you spoke on stage, you talked about having yellow sticky notes, and I think it was something related to traveling to 130 countries and eating with 130 families and other goals you had related to travel and exploring the world. Can you talk a little bit about visualization, affirmations, mindset management, and what you do now, but also what really propelled you to be so successful related to that?
Sure. I'll pick one on mindset because it was pretty much life-changing for me. As a leader, a CEO, a founder, whatever, as a leader, you believe your job is to lead, right? That means tell people what to do. Ask any kid what the boss does. They tell people what to do. The mindset shift for me that was life-changing when I realized that I need to spend less time leading and more time creating leaders. And that was completely different than what I thought. So real leaders don't create followers. They create other leaders. So when I rewrote my own job description and said my job, in fact, let me tell you a quick story of what it evolved to, how it's supposed to look. I stopped running everything, and I started spending my time, scheduling time every week to build leaders around me. And there's no way you can scale companies like we did with Priceline/Booking.com to 190 countries if you don't have a team. But really quick, I'll tell you a story of what it looks like. One day I'm on the road. My team calls, and they're like, hey, boss, we met this 20-year-old rock star kid. And I said, don't even wait for me. You don't need my permission. Hire the kid. So I get back in town, and I spend the morning looking at this genius's work, this 20-year-old kid. At lunch, I go down to the conference room, and the kid doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know I own the company. He doesn't know I'm the CEO. And I walk into the conference room, and I ask the team, when my people work through lunch, I never ask them to, but if they're working through lunch, I buy, right? So I said, can I get you guys anything? Well, the 20-year-old kid who doesn't know who I am turns to me and says, yeah, I'm kind of busy. Can you go pick up my laundry? Well, you could hear the air suck out of the room. It's like when a soldier, this is what went in my brain, a soldier just made that click where they're stepped on a landmine and everybody's waiting for him to blow up. And everyone's looking at me to see what I'm going to say. And I turned to the kid and I said, sure, where's the ticket? And a little bit later, I'm outside and my two vice presidents come running out. Jeff, please, don't fire him. He didn't know who you were. He doesn't know you own the company. He doesn't know you're the CEO. I was like, guys, calm down. And they said, please don't fire him. I said, why do you think I'm going to fire him? They said, because you're so angry. And I said, why do you guys think I'm so angry? And they said, because you stormed out of the building. And I said, I didn't storm out of the building. And they said, what are you doing in the parking lot? I said, I'm going to pick up that kid's dry cleaning. And they said, you're the CEO and the owner of the company, and you're picking up a 20-year-old rookie's dry cleaning. I said, that kid is the single most brilliant designer I've ever seen. He will triple our revenues. We will win awards for the product that kid is building. I said, so not only am I going to pick up that young kid's dry cleaning, but if you guys need me this afternoon, I will be out back washing that kid's car. That was the mindset shift that enabled us to really grow when I got out of the way.
Okay, so many times I hear from successful people like, hey, you have to keep your confidence as an entrepreneur. You have to have some courage and conviction in what you're doing. And you're such a servant leader, like supporting people on the team, like you just talked about. How much of you becoming really successful was having an extreme confidence in yourself? Or did you already know that you were going to produce so much value in the world and it was a matter of time? Did you, what was your mindset like before you hit big success many times?
I think the answer to that, so confidence is a requirement. Arrogance is one of the 7 deadly sins. The problem is the line between them is really narrow, right? Confidence for me was about trusting instinct. And I got to say, I remember, by the way, when we did the IPO for Priceline, and we kind of looked around the room as a bunch of tech entrepreneurs, and we said, we need adult supervision. So we went and hired Wall Street type executives to come into the company to run it. We actually hired the retired CEO of Citibank, came on as the CEO of the company. But this was a guy that we'd sit down to make a multi-million-dollar decision, and he would say, well, we should hire McKinsey, do a study, generate reports, and we would say, it doesn't feel right, let's not do that. And what I realized in those moments is trusting your instinct, right? So is it confidence? Yes, but your instinct just needs to be retitled. It should be called your fast intelligence, because your instinct is the sum total of everything you've ever gotten wrong, everything you've ever gotten right. So for me, I tended to trust my instinct, which led to confidence when your instinct was right.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I remember there was a Harvard Business Review article that said, should you trust your gut? And the conclusion was, it depends what your gut is made of, right? So it's based on your history. So what was the major turning point in your career? Maybe it was like a strategic asset you acquired or something you learned, and then everything went 100 miles per hour faster.
I think that major turning point wound up being was that the one about mistake? I want to make sure
I skipped one.
Okay,
we can go back to that. We'll go back.
Kind of what I thought. Let me go back to that one.
Sure.
But there was a super important learning moment that changed everything too.
Sure.
I want to share that really.
Yeah, go for it.
That you and I had talked about it before. And that was realizing that too many people are blinded by their own brilliance. And what I mean by that is, you guys know that when people pitch you. My idea, it's just like, I have a film company, and every single person brings us their life story and say, this is the greatest story in the world that everybody needs to hear. And in fact, maybe your mom wants to hear it, but probably nobody else. Every pitch we get, right, is the most brilliant idea ever. So a change point for us was being blinded. One of the companies I built that failed was because we were so sure that we were right. And I just want to share a really fast story of how I learned to fix that problem with this mistake. So the mistake is, you think your idea is brilliant, everyone around you thinks it's brilliant, and you're plugging forward. I was spending the day with a gentleman in the retail business who'd built a retail company that everybody said would fail. And so I asked him, all the experts in your industry said this was a bad idea. How did you know it would work? Why'd you do it anyway when everyone said it was wrong? And this gentleman said, because I didn't listen to the experts, I listened to the farmers. And I said, you got to tell me the story. And he said, Jeff, everybody on Wall Street thought my idea was bad. Everybody in retail thought it was bad. But none of those people were shopping in my store. He said, I'm building a product for farmers. So I said, what do you do? He said, I bought a John Deere hat, true story, and some overalls and boots. And he said, every other Friday, I would leave my office, sneak out, I would change clothes, I would go across town, and I would sit in the cafe with the diner with farmers, buy them coffee and apple pie, and talk about life. He said, that's how I designed my business. That guy, just FYI, was Sam Walton. And I spent the day with Sam, and I said, everyone said you can't build big box retail in small town America. He said, everybody except the farmers, and that's the people I listen to. Last thing about that, after that, I started scheduling every other Friday. I would change clothes, leave my office. What I used to do in the early Priceline days was put on jeans, tennis shoes, and I would go to the grocery store and push a cart around for hours talking to moms about their vacation plans. Quit being blinded by your own brilliance. Spend your day, even secretly, in the life of your customer, and that's the only opinion that matters. That was life-changing for us, and it's what we learned from failing before that.
Awesome. It's the opposite of hiring a consulting company. It's recommended by some big CEO or something, right? Great. And then do you want to comment on any strategic choke point or increased momentum point where after you did that one thing, everything started speeding up for you in one of the companies or in your career overall?
I think that for that, it was the thing that caused that acceleration was an extreme focus on operational efficiency. And let me explain that because I witnessed it somewhere else. When you are, I don't care what business you're in this room, every single company, you have a team of people, you are paying people, they are doing something with your money during the day, and meanwhile you have a set of goals. What we were not doing was really refining and streamlining that focus. So here, I'll just share the lesson we learned and challenge you guys to go do this. So step one is to write on the wall of your office the only reason anybody comes into that office. So I'm going to give you the example. We went back and we put on the wall, sell more hotel rooms. And the question is, the point is, the only reason you should be in this office, anybody, is to sell more hotel rooms. But I started a program. And the program was this. You're walking down the hall. I can stop you and say, show me what you're doing right now and tell me how that is going to help us sell more hotel rooms. You have two choices. You can explain it to me, or you need to put it down and go do something else. But I had another level of that. I'm the CEO. I come in and I ask him, I need you to do something. You know what rights I give all my people? He can say to me, Jeff, I think that's great, but I don't see how it's going to sell more hotel rooms, so I'm not going to do it. They don't have to do what I tell them either. Our focus every day is to constantly challenge it's a time and motion study. What are every person doing every day? And not only do we constantly ask each other, but it's on the wall so that you never forget there's only one reason to be in this office, to sell another hotel room. If you're doing anything that isn't helping us sell a hotel room, you need to put it down and go do something else. And when we started that program, I think we became about 40% of the stuff we were doing. We could no longer really remember why, and we couldn't tie it to the reason we came to business into the office. So we became extremely efficient, which is what drove the profitability up so much. We just don't do anything that doesn't get us to the goal.
Sure. Makes sense. Got it. So what if someone's sitting here in the room, they want to be a top 0.1% of their field, they want to outcompete others in their industry or sub-niche? What advice would you give them that's really helped you besides operational efficiency?
All right. So let me go to the end and then I'll back up because it's interesting with investors and startups in this building today, right? I on boards that I serve on, I get to the end of the year and we're sitting down. So now it's December 31st and I'm with the entrepreneur and the investor. And I say, so how did the year go? And simultaneously, the entrepreneur says great and the investor says horrible. And I'm like, aren't you guys in the same company? And I asked the investor and they're like, I thought this company was going to get a lot more done this year. And I asked the founder who says, I can't believe how much we got done this year. And you sit there and thinking, okay, what was the expectation? So we went back and we came up with just a technique. Every year, every January 1, let's say figuratively, this is the first time I did this. I took out a sheet of paper and I wrote down on this date, December 31st. So write down December 31st, 2024. And then I drew success as quantifiable, but as comprehensively as I can. If this were December 31st, what conversation should we be having that everyone's going to say, wow, what a great year? I drew it, right? But then I did something different. I turned the paper over and I drew the opposite. I said, what does failure look like? And if December 31st looks like this, we failed. I don't need to wait till December 31st. And so what I do was I had all the stakeholders every year sign both sides of that. We all agree that this is what success looks like. By the way, we had money that was in escrow accounts based on tranches, and we got an agreement from the investor that if this is December, you can release the money without my permission. It's an escrow account. It's automatically released to us. On the other hand, I made all the employees sign the other side. And they said, what are we doing? I said, you are pre-firing yourself. If it's December 31st and we look like this, I should not be walking you out the door. Your car should be loaded and we should be figuring out something to do. And because we write it up yearly, we measure it quarterly, but we track it monthly. And it enabled me one time, I had no idea this was going to be such a big deal in my young career, back when I was building before we built all those airport kiosks. I had an idea with a company. I wrote failure, I wrote success, all stakeholders signed the agreement, right? You might change it during the year and everyone signs off on it. But at one point, 6 months through the year, I said, here's where we are. Here's what we're tracking against. Here's what failure looks like. Can we do anything to fix it? And when we ran out of ideas, I called the assistant to the investor and I wired the remaining funds back. Well, I had no idea that was going to be the shot heard around the world. The investor called me and said, what'd you just do? I said, I just wired the rest of the year back. He said, why? And I said, because I can already see I'm not going to make it. And he said, right, but here's how investment works. You spend all my money, then you call me and tell me you need more because you haven't hit the goals. I said, unless I can see that I'm not going to make it and I'll just give it back to you now. That shot, I would not believe how many investors would come up to me. Are you the guy that wired back the money to the investors before you ran out of it? I was like, yes, because I actually had metrics to define success and failure. I think that's how we got to that, whatever you said, 0.1%,
right?
Because we were so focused on specific definitions of success and failure that we never lost sight of what we were driving for. The good news is not that you won't fail. It's that you'll fail faster and cheaper than everybody else. We failed, but we failed fast. We failed cheap. And when we succeeded, money was already being released because we had already defined what the end goal was.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. Related to investments and dealing with investors, being CEO of a publicly traded company before, what's your number one strategy, tip, suggestion when trying to, build a relationship with a new investor or close a big deal? Is there any go-to strategy or any lesson that's so obvious to you? And when you speak around globally, you just find that most entrepreneurs mess this one thing.
Absolutely. I will tell you the two words that don't exist in way too many entrepreneurs. See, I've been lucky that I spent my whole life the first half of my life on one side of the table, and the second half of my life on the other side of the table. So I've been the guy begging for money, raising hundreds of millions in my career. Now I'm sitting on the other side listening to pitches. And there are two words. It's a thing. It's an industry. It's a job called IR, and entrepreneurs don't even know what it means. Investor relations are something that I am woefully disappointed in. Investors, when I ask entrepreneurs, founders, business owners, investors are people you call when you need money, right? So that's the only time they call typically. If they have bad news, they avoid you. If they have good news, they want to talk to you. But what they're missing is the constant communication of investor relations. So I managed always, and I'm amazed, right? I managed investor relations. I would frequently. One time, I just showed up at a polo match. Believe me, I don't know what the hell polo is. It looks scary and dangerous, but it's because my lead investor, that was his favorite sport. I saw it on his Facebook page. I showed up there one day, and he's like, what are you doing here? I said, just spending a day with you. And he said, what do you want? I said, nothing. And at the end of the day, he said, wait, you don't even like polo. You spent a day with me because you know I like it, and you didn't ask me for anything. I said, I just want you to know how much this relationship means to me and how much I appreciate you. Investor relationship management is the piece that founders don't do. They don't manage relationships when they don't need something. It's a relationship, and you have to build it over time.
Your Facebook page might get a few hits today, I think, right? See what sports you like. So yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. That is something that we hear quite often from our investors, the follow-up and consistency of communication after the close. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is last time you spoke on stage, we were talking out in the hallway about this. You gave the example of finding one of your employees who had grown up in a trailer park or an RV. The mother still lived in an RV, and the employee's goal was to buy their mom a house. And you figure that out, and you said, okay, well, if we get all this done, we'll go and buy your mom a house. And you told the story about how that made that employee super motivated. Since hearing that, it's hard for me to take that and implement it in my business and find such an impactful story. But can you share what you told me out in the hallway about how do you make that practical and do that often in your business maybe?
Sure. And you know how that came, guys? I was a CEO building a company, and I got a call from someone that said, I need to hire a CEO. Can I interview you? And I started to say, no, I have my own startup. But I was like, I want to see how people do interviews. So I went to an interview just to get better at interviewing. And when the interview was over, I said, let me get this straight. you want me to work my ass off around the clock so one day you can buy a bigger boat. And he's like, I didn't say that. I said, you kind of did, right? And then I got in the car and I was like, uh-oh, how do we interview people? We tell them our mission statement, our vision statement, our company's goals, our dreams. That is you as a founder. That is your dream. That is not the employee's dream. It's not motivating at all. The employee, we say, here's a job description. If you do this stuff, I'll pay you. If you don't, you're fired. And then someday I'm going to get a big boat because I own the company. You might get a little something. Not motivating. So I changed my technique for interviewing, and I started asking people. And the first question I ask is, what's something in your life right now at this moment that's most important to you? The question is this: why do you come into this office every day? And I started looking around and I realized, I'll ask you guys, do you know the real reason the people that work for you come in the office? It's not to make your company successful. That's a byproduct. They don't wake up every day wanting you to get richer or wanting your company to succeed. That's your dream. But they do wake up every day, the story I told last time I was here, worrying about getting their mother out of a rusted trailer and moving her into a house. So I went and asked everybody that works for me, can you tell me why you come into this office every day? What matters to you? And I posted pictures. If you come into my office, there's photos all over the walls that look random. They're not random. I know why everybody that works for me comes into the office every day. That's actually my job. My job is to make sure his mom gets a house. Everybody that your career with me generates the life that you wish you had. The only way to find that out is to ask them. So the answer to your question is sometimes it's big. Like when we sold that company, we bought Chris's mom a house, which was one of my best days in my life. However, a lot of times it's not that big. It might be something that I had one person that she said to me, I want to move out of engineering into marketing. I want to learn it, and I want to learn international business. Because I had that picture on the wall, I was leaving for a trip to Asia one day. And I said, can you get a babysitter next week? She said, why? And I said, I know what your goal is, and I'm going to take you with me at my expense on a trip to Asia to help you achieve your goal of learning international business. Finding out what they come into your office for every day and making that your mission. And by the way, I reverse engineered all that because I sold a company to a Fortune 500 company. And I was told that day, they said, in all the years from the day you started the company to the day you sold it, Jeff, no one that works for you has ever quit. And I was like, okay, that's the coolest thing I've ever done. And I don't know how I did that. So I started calling people. I'm like, why don't you guys quit? And they're like, dude, you want us to quit? Is this a problem? I said, no, I just want to understand why everybody wants to work here. Your job is to build the company where all the best people in your industry all want to work for you and then make sure they never leave. That's a job assignment. That wasn't in my job description. Now it is.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that answer. And what I like about it is, let's give him a round of applause. That was great. What I like about it is immediately it intuitively makes sense. So you're going to have a much more loyal team if you do that. It also plays to, it's like you're being generous by caring about their needs, but by taking good care of them, it selfishly makes your company more valuable too, right? It's like everybody wins in the process. And I think the media loves to make anyone successful in modern day in society look evil, right? And so one thing you said on stage last time that I won't ever forget is that there's nothing wrong with making a lot of money. It's just wrong if you don't do anything good with it, right? And so I thought that was a really impactful statement that you made. And by the way, on top of interviewing 100 billionaires for billionaires.com, we're also reading the 240 billionaire books. And one book that I tried to finish before Jeff got on stage, but I'm on chapter 9, is called Scale. And Jeff Hoffman co-wrote that, with David Finkel. And you can grab that on Audible, like I did. If you're liking this interview, then you should grab that Audible book and learn more about some of the operational efficiency systems that Jeff talks about in that book. So make sure and check that out. Are there any other publications or resources, just while we're on that topic, that people should check out if they want to learn more from you in general?
Well, I only ever written that one book just to answer the question. 3 of the companies I was involved with were startups that turned into multi-billion-dollar companies, and people kept asking the question, you guys must have done something right. So went backwards and said, what are all the things we actually did that worked, right? I didn't sit on a stage. I didn't write a book. I didn't do any of this until I'd actually built the stuff I'm telling you, because I've been to too many things where people were giving me advice and they had never done that thing. So afterwards, I went back and said, how did we turn these companies? The market cap of the company is like $120 billion now. We started it on a folding table. So people say, how do you start with a folding table and a handful of people and no money? and create a company like that? And it turns out there were answers to that. So reverse engineer those, wrote those down. That's what Scale is about. And I just made a giving back pledge saying, I'm just going to share everything I've ever learned with as many people as I can.
Awesome. So you've been interviewed hundreds of times. Every time I go on LinkedIn, you're giving a talk in Dubai or Singapore or Sydney or somewhere, right? And so out of all the hundreds of talks, hundreds of times you've been interviewed, what's the smartest question that no one ever asks you and they really should be asking to get the most out of the interview?
Okay, so I'm going to turn that a different direction.
Go for it.
And luckily, you told me you were going to ask me that. Because it's not the question people should ask in an interview. It's just the smartest question anybody ever asked me. And I'm doing that because when you asked me that, the answer came immediately into my head, and I just talked to you about trusting your gut. So the smartest question anybody ever asked me, I am, and a lot of people in this room can relate. So I have my daughter. I take her to lunch one day, and the goal of lunch is to apologize that I work so much. And I sit down with my daughter, and I said, look, I'm really sorry. I've been so busy. The company's really, I used to tell people in the early internet days at the launch of Priceline, if you ever seen the rodeo, and they have to stay on the bull, ride the bull for 8 seconds, and you're like, 8 seconds? How can anybody not do it? And then nobody makes it past 4 seconds. And you're like, that must be way harder than it looks. Well, people said, what was it like launching an internet company then at that growth rate? And I said, it was like that, but we were on the bull for 3 weeks. There was no 8 seconds. We could not let go that time. So I'm talking to my daughter, and I said, look, I just want to apologize for how busy I am and the amount of time, the things and time that I've missed with you. And she said, Dad, I need to ask you a couple of questions. And these were the questions that came to mind when you said that. I said, okay. She said, what's my favorite color? And I told her. She said, what's my favorite book? And I told her. And she said, what song do I need to hear when I'm sad? And I told her. And she said, what story makes me happy? And I told her. And I said, can I ask where we're going with this? And she said, I'm going to try not to get emotional. She said, being here doesn't make you a good father. Being engaged makes you a good father. She said, I have friends who are fathers are home 9 to 5. They're there every day, and they could not answer one of those questions. That's the smartest question anyone ever asked me. Thank you. She said, if I have to choose, she said, I'll take as much time as I can get. But she said, she's this high. She said, if I have to choose between quantity and quality, she said, you're always so engaged with me that I wouldn't change a thing. That when she said to me, tell me what song makes me happy when I'm sad. And I'm like, why do you ask me that? That was actually the smartest question anyone's ever asked me.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great. So, related to that, most of the times when I study billionaires, they work very hard and very smart. It's like someone saying, what's better for chess, AI chess player or a human? It's actually a human that uses AI, right? So there's been one or two exceptions out of 100 plus billionaires I've studied. So in your experience, is it very obvious that you have to work very, very hard and try to always be working smarter on how you're working hard? Or when you look back, do you think, if I just would have been smarter about things and read books 8 hours a day like Warren, maybe I wouldn't have had to work so hard? What's your opinion on that?
So I'm so glad you asked that, because there's all this social media now about all these people that say grind, grind, grind. If you're not up I saw somebody yesterday. He said, I'm successful because I get up at 2:30 every morning. I'm like, I'm tired because I get up early in the morning. And so this grind culture focuses on activity, not results. I don't agree with that at all. Do you want to know what people say? I'm an entrepreneur. I work round the clock like it's a badge of honor. It's a badge of inefficiency. Do you know what I told my team? I sat them down one day and I said, I want you to figure out how we can do in 2 days what every other company takes a whole week to do. That is your objective. So work hard when you have to. We had a time when we were launching. Actually, I literally remember the official launch of Priceline.com. I think we slept on the floor of the office 3 straight days. Nobody went home for 3 days because we were launching something. So work hard is absolutely a requirement. But to work hard arbitrarily so you can brag about grinding is just stupid, right? That's time you should have been with your daughter. Working smart is the key. Figure out how to do in 2 days what everyone else takes a week. But if it breaks one day, then you need to be willing to go 3 nights without sleep to fix it. It's a combination of both, but I hate the messaging that's out there now that if you ain't grinding, you ain't trying. And my answer to them is, I ain't grinding because I automated that whole thing and I'm on the beach while you're still at your company.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. So let's end with the Global Entrepreneur Network. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing there, what your goal is, how people in the room here could support you with resources, introductions, capital, if it's a nonprofit, et cetera. Like how can the people in the room here just appreciated all the advice you just gave them, support you in your mission there?
Thanks. I'll do two things real quick here. So again, the goal was to give back by teaching everything we know. I only know one thing, entrepreneurship, but I do know how to turn ideas into companies. And we've been doing that for a while, right? Well, we were blessed enough when I launched a music company that I won a Grammy. We launched a TV company. I won a couple Emmys. Something somewhere we figured out. So what I said was we will share that with everybody, but I actually don't like the word entrepreneurship anymore, even though our nonprofit is called the Global Entrepreneurship Network, and it's because entrepreneurship's intimidating. People think you have to know tech. They think it's about money and business. I would personally rather call it self-determination. What we want people to do is own their future and design it, especially youth. I just came from an event in Europe. I just got back from where we brought creative kids from all over the world. We flew them all in and gave them a stage to show their creative skills the way athletes get a stage, because the athletes are stars in school and the creative kids are outcast. We're teaching people how to use their skill sets to design their future and other people's future. So that's what we do at the Global Entrepreneurship Network. I'm proud to say I'm the chairman of it. We're on the ground in 200 countries now, teaching people how to help themselves. It's literally as simple as that. Don't be dependent on anybody. We'll teach you the skills and the attitude you need to be able to take care of yourself. But I will say, because sometimes people ask me how to help, we're good there. We have really good sponsors and funders for that. I also have a children's charity called World Youth Horizons, and it's literally worldyouthhorizons.com. That's my personal foundation with a really simple goal. We are going to find the children in the world that have no chance at a better life. It's our job to give them a chance at a better life. Quick example, after the civil war in Uganda, the parents killed each other. The kids were left in the jungles to die. We rounded them all up. I bought land. I built buildings. We don't call them orphanages, youth homes. We built farms, taught the kids how to raise animals and feed themselves. We planted crops. We send them all to school. Sometimes we have to build the school. So my personal foundation is to give kids that don't have a shot at a better life. It's our responsibility in this room with our success to give the kids who can't help themselves a way to help themselves. And sometimes people ask if they can help, if they want to do something. They're more than welcome to help us at worldyouthhorizons.com.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think Jeff is a great example, just like Kid Newman, who was on stage earlier, of like what we're trying to do in this investor club and create a perpetual learning machine and all become better, smarter, more effective people because of, keynotes and fireside chats and panelists, such as Jeff Hoffman. So I'm sure everyone in the room agrees with me. They got a ton of value out of that. And so we loved having you here. Let's give Jeff a big round of applause.
Thank you.